I'm Sam Millsap, and let me say at the outset that I'm pleased to be with you today, and one of the things that I want to assure you of at the outset is that I'm no wild-eyed, pointy-headed liberal social scientist type. I'm the former elected district attorney from San Antonio, Texas. I was the DA in San Antonio in the mid-1980s. I was a member during that period of the Board of Directors of the National District Attorneys Association, and I was also a member of a group called the Executive Working Group, which was made up of 2 district attorneys that were elected by the National District Attorneys Board of Directors, 2 attorneys general that were elected by the NAG Board, and the top people in the Justice Department. As district attorney, I supervised the prosecution of a number of capital murder cases, and I compiled a perfect record in those cases. Each of the defendants that I prosecuted was convicted, and each of those defendants has been executed by the state of Texas. I think it's fair to say that I have done more than just talk the talk on this issue, and I don't come to you today with pie from the sky. I have lived in the belly of the beast, and it's against that backdrop that I speak today. I was a strong supporter of the death penalty until a few years ago, and although I now oppose it, one of the things that I want you to understand is that I'm not here with a preachy message about morality. I don't oppose the death penalty on moral grounds, and I have great respect for the many thoughtful people who believe that some crimes are so horrible that the only appropriate response from civilized people is the imposition of the death penalty. I agree with them in principle, and I would not oppose the death penalty today if I were still confident that the criminal justice system is actually competent in America to decide who may live and who must die. I support this bill, and I believe that Texans of goodwill can study this issue carefully with open minds and make recommendations to you and your colleagues that make sense for Texas. One of the things that you should know by way of background is that in December of 2005, the Houston Chronicle ran a series of investigative pieces that called into question one of my prosecutions, the much discussed Reuben Cantu case. The Chronicle argued very persuasively that Reuben Cantu had been not only wrongfully convicted but wrongfully executed. And one of the things that I want to say from the bottom of my heart is that I fervently hope that there are only a few prosecutors in America today who find themselves, as I do, in the position of having to admit an error in judgment that may have led to the execution of an innocent man. I believe prosecutors whose very best efforts may have produced unfortunate results in capital murder cases have a moral and ethical duty to accept responsibility for those mistakes. It's for this reason that I encourage you to create this special commission so that testimony can be received from experts and from ordinary folks who care deeply about this issue and report its recommendations to you and your colleagues. You should know the answers to the crucial questions that are boiling in this debate across America today. Among those, particularly in the challenging economic time that we find ourselves in, is just how expensive is the death penalty in Texas. It's been established in state after state, by study after study, year after year, that it actually costs less to imprison a young murderer for the balance of his natural life than it does to take him through the ordeal, the legal morass, and through the execution process. If that were found to be the case in Texas, it would enable you and your colleagues to decide whether it makes sense to continue to pour declining tax revenues down a bottomless black hole, or whether that money could be better spent on public education, energy, health care, and critical infrastructure needs. Another crucial question for Texans is whether the death penalty deters crimes. The United States Supreme Court has repeatedly held that it's up to the states to make that decision individually. a Texas study commission might take note of the undeniable fact that homicide rates in death penalty states are consistently higher year after year than they are in states that don't use the death penalty. And it might conclude on that basis that the death penalty does not deter future crimes. Finally, a study commission might conclude that the application of the death penalty in Texas is arbitrary and that it discriminates against the poor and minorities. These points are resonating all across the country in state after state that elect conservative Republicans. This bill is not part of some fuzzy-headed, cockamamie liberal conspiracy. Conservative mainstream America is taking a second look at the death penalty. Just yesterday, Governor Richards in New Mexico signed an abolition bill. And I want to remind you that Governor Richardson comes from a state that elected a conservative Republican United States Senator for more than 3 decades, and he just retired. In the state of Montana, where John McCain recently, which voted for John McCain in the last election and reelected its senator, its Republican senator, the Senate recently passed an abolition bill, and that bill is moving through the House right now. In the incredibly conservative state of Nebraska, the unicameral legislature has come within an eyelash several times of passing abolition legislation. And the momentum that we see in state houses across the country is finding its way into the jury box. Because what we're seeing all over the country, and Texas is no exception, is the conviction rate in capital murder cases plummet. And that's an undeniable fact. The other thing that I think is important is that although the United States is seen as a retentionist country by the international community, and that's because the United States Supreme Court has simply said that it's okay, it's constitutional to execute people. The fact is that over 90% of the executions that have taken place in the last 30 years have occurred in 11 mostly southern states. About 60% of the states, and this is a fact that most people overlook, about 60% of the states, the 15 that have abolished the death penalty, and an equal number that simply haven't executed anybody in decades, simply don't use the death penalty. The death penalty is used only by a small minority of the states. And although we like to say that we're American by birth and Texan by choice, there's a reason why so few states use the death penalty. And the reason is that human beings are not infallible. Our juries determine guilt or innocence based on testimony from fact and expert witnesses who may or may not be telling the truth, and even when they are trying to tell the truth, as they see it, may simply get it wrong. The criminal justice decision is driven by decisions that are made by imperfect human beings, good people who are working hard, but who are imperfect. And as hard as we try to always get it right, we sometimes get it wrong.